Welcome back. We're looking forward, B'ezras Hashem, hopefully to even conclude today's Igeres HaKodesh, which is Yud Zayin, the 17th of the fourth epistle, fourth segment, that is, of Tanya Kadisha, the 17th epistle. We did mention that we over the different times that the easiest way and probably the proper way is to always just jump straight into it, because there's no need for recap of the previous class. I believe this is even the 7th class on this very epistle. So what about the previous information? Of course, we need the previous information in order to appreciate today's learning, but nonetheless, to click away, to say it brief, wherever you're watching this, but there is an advantage of the original website, Tanya online, one word.com, and you have all the previous classes lined up on the left side of the screen. It usually starts from the top. In other words, the more latter ones are at the top of the screen. So it's easy to access and understand and appreciate what we're learning. And of course, if you're joining us, welcome back, meaning that you need not to really go back to the previous classes. You could appreciate this in a profound message of the Alter Rebbe in this very Igeres, and so telling, like every one of the every part of the works of the Alter Rebbe is indeed so telling, so revealing. And that's who the Alter Rebbe was, to introduce us into Yemei Mashiach. U'moleh ha'aretz deos Hashem, the land will be full of the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Alter Rebbe came to feed us, introduce us to this very knowledge, but not just tidbits of knowledge here and there, but pull us in to a life of focus and knowledge, and like kind of default mind of a Yid, additional to the Torah and that he learns, that context of knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Torah that he learns constantly. Torah is Chayenu ve'erech yameinu, our life, and the length of our day, our respiration, our length of our days. That's what Torah is to a Yid. But on top of that, Moleh ha'aretz deos Hashem, which the Rambam refers to, the Pasuk refers to in the famous Rambam towards the end of the Mishnah Torah, the end of the Rambam's work of Mishnah Torah, the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, the Rambam, and the very end where he speaks Das Hashem is additional to Torah, to the knowledge of Torah, is literally knowing. It's a pasuk in Torah, it's a verse in Torah. Know HaKadosh Baruch Hu like you know anything. You appreciate it. You know a program. You know of a concept. There's knowledge, and if this knowledge is relevant, there's excitement. That's also the difference of Das and Chochmah Bina, as we learned in the 3rd chapter of Likutei Amorim. Das, the Torah doesn't say in a way the Vanto or a Lashon expression of Chochmah, but the Adaita, because the idea is to become connected with this knowledge, intimate with the knowledge, because that's what produces a change within the system of the person. Love to Hashem, fear of Hashem, real love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, real fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, reverence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we talk about love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rambam there in Hilchos Tshuva, that is, because about a passion. He has a passion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that can only be through a comprehensive understanding and appreciation in their Creator, to which they want to connect to and want to establish this passionate love to. So that's through Yedias, to the Yedias Hashem. And of course, that's what the Rambam means. This was the pasuk, Yadaita Hayim, Moleh ha'aretz deos Hashem. The Rambam makes it very clear in the end of Mishnah Torah, the last 2 halachas. The Mishnah Torah, you're talking about knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this was the Alter Rebbe as the neshama which came down to introduce a nation, to introduce a world to this default state when Mashiach will come. It's in this chapter, this epistle, the knowledge or the insight is so deep and so profound and so exciting, if you will. The whole phenomenon of Sevav Kolam and Itri Seyim Bereisheim, what's this crowns on the head? You learn crowns on the head, it looks noble, but maybe the crown gets a bit heavy. You want to take it off a little bit. What's this? tzaddikim yeshem v'treiseyim b'reishayim. It's nice on the onset. It captures the mind, so they can sit with their crowns on their head. But of course, it has deeper meaning, and the Alter Rebbe is telling us what the deeper meaning is of itreiseyim b'reishayim. It's about the Seiv of Kalaman experience. Of course, this is saying this very brief. You have to, if you're following, of course, you can appreciate this. It's actually, we had this in the last class, or to tap into the previous class of this very chapter, of this very epistle, Seiv of Kalaman, Keser, and so on and so forth, and why this world will be able to have the experience of the Seiv of Kalaman revelation, manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as such, the tzaddikim, the neviim, the greatest neshamas are going to come down to this world even after they're basking in the deepest levels of experiencing the nenin, driving the light of the ziva shechina of the Rebbe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Gan Eden, at the levels of Gan Eden, Gan Eden Atach, Gan Eden Ha'elyon, Shalom Moshe Rabbeinu as an example. But he's coming back down to this world. Why so? Explained it. This is extremely exciting, if you will. Exciting because it excites the mind, and it gives it's not only like via daita or yediyas Hashem and just some information. This is transformative. It's a transformative experience when one learns Chassidus Chabad. This is what the Alter Rebbe brought in. That's why it's called Chassidus Chabad. Alter Rebbe wanted to introduce us to the excitement of Yediyas Hashem in many different levels. The Sefer Tanya Kadisha. This is the Torah Shebiksav of Teres Achsidus, which is thousands of Sfarim in the 7th generation of the dynasty of Chabad. Thousands of Sfarim, and each one is more. In Yiddish, it would be Gishmak over the other, or distinctively Gishmak. Every Rebbe came with his Torah, until all continuing this introduction, this gateway into the Yediyas Hashem, which will be the norm when Mashiach will come. We mentioned the other day, like the Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov came 400 years before Matan Torah. The Rabbeim came a few hundred years before, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, of course, these Sneitzes of Eirishul Mashiach, as we know, and the Hemshech to the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid, and the Alter Rebbe, the dynasty of Chabad is the dynasty which brings in a generation, a world, into the Yemei Mashiach, and this becomes the norm. And this becomes the status of the entire, the default of the Kol Ha'olam. Actually, it says there Kol Ha'olam. The Mefarshim say in the first part of the Halacha, the end of Mishnah Torah, refers to the entire world, even Gentiles. And then he says, Yisrael Chachamim G'delim. Eden will be again an edge over as Yisrael Am Kereve, B'ni B'cheri Yisrael, the close knit, being the chosen nation. In other words, of course, with the mandate to be Eir Lagoyim, to bring the shine of a lakus of godliness onto the nations of the world. So this is this Yud Zayin. Like I say, every chapter is another insight, and another Yishmaka insight, which Alter Rebbe introduced. So this is the Igeres HaKodesh that we mentioned. Let's try to say this part. Re-mention again that Igeres HaKodesh is the 4th segment. Tanya has 5, as we mentioned. It's also with much precision. This is the Torah Shebiksav. Tanya Kaddish is the Torah Shebiksav of Torah, known to be the Torah Shebiksav of Torah Achsidus. That's the 5 segments. This is the 4th. We merited to conclude all the 3 before. Lukoti Amorim, Shayich B'Emuna, Igeres HaTshuva, and Igeres HaKodesh. We merited to learn the 7th, come up to the 17th Igeres. Igeres HaKodesh is, of course, distinct, holy letters, holy epistles. We had a presentation of the whole backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh. In the beginning of Igeres HaKodesh 10, it's also click away. It has its own backdrop. It's a distinct segment. Also, again, it's, not to repeat, again, in the beginning of 10, 7 back, we had a presentation of what Igeres HaKodesh overall is all about, at least to the best of our ability there. And so we're going to continue with Zehu. many times Al Rebbe himself cross-references from one chelik to another. We do it also, sometimes even now, the idea of Das is Hashem. We just mentioned. Das is not just like say Chassidus Das. Al Rebbe has a whole part of a few lines, but which is loaded. It's such an important part of the whole connection of Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Precisely with that, Das is a game changer. Das is not about a good class or a comprehensive knowledge in Hashem. Not necessarily it establishes transformation in the system of the person. Not necessarily it arouses a love, a passionate connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not necessarily. And if it's not a passionate, or if it's not any deep connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, really, it doesn't, not necessarily any change, reformation, and there's nothing really happening within the system of the person. Therefore, Das is such an important component. So we just quoted there, we just mentioned Das. You get it, the first chelik, the third chapter, towards the end of the third chapter, it's a whole different, it's one of the cognitive faculties, which is really, from a certain perspective and point of view, the most important. Again, of course, you need the knowledge, you need the information to have the transformation. But what is transformational is via what the faculty of Das, even though we're Chacham Bit. Anyway, you can take a look there. So other times we cross-reference, and here in this website, it's just really a click away, and it's easy, Divrei Torah are considered poor in one and rich in the other part of Torah, so you could always look and enhance your knowledge and the very subject that you're presently learning. So v'zeu rechava mitzchot b'tzvas chomed. We're holding on kuf chavav. Where did we reach there? Oh, we said last week, if you recall, why is it in this world? Let's try to repeat that. We said we're going to try to make it elaborate a little more. Why is it dafka in this world? Why is it dafka in this world do we have the Tchias HaMeisim, the revelation of Seviv Kolamin? You have to, again, if you're following, you know exactly what we're talking about, but if you're new to it, you have to see the previous classes. Seviv Kolamin is a transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem is formed, so by him, so before he becomes the Mamale, filling and connecting, literally translated, filling worlds, connecting with Olam. It's the Seviv. Why dafka in this world? And that's why the neshamas are coming down, rushing down to this world, because whatever they have is just a tiny bit. We mentioned then the previous classes and last week of the Alter Rebbe's famous example, which he brings many times, L'Kuti Torah, in Torah Eir, and L'Kuti Torah, and again brought in so many places thereafter by the Rabbeim, our holy Rabbeim. But the Alter Rebbe has is that the whole, based on the pasuk, where everything was created with a yud and a kei. The Gemara says that the whole Elam Haba was created with a yud, one letter. The Elam Hazeh was created another letter, hey. Of course, the yud is deeper than the hey. Therefore, Elam Haba, Gan Eden was created, all levels of Gan Eden. So one us letter of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What about the whole Eibishter? Yeah, the whole Eibishter is in Torah. The whole Eibishter is in mitzvahs. Again, we're saying this succinctly, but see the previous classes or learn the L'Kuti Torah. Like you have one little teaspoon of the entire Mediterranean. I made a dent in the Mediterranean. I took a teaspoon out. Yeah, categorically you probably did, but no, you didn't make an impact or no indent, because there's the whole Mediterranean is in a tiny teaspoon. The whole Olam Haba is a teaspoon in comparison to the whole Mediterranean, the whole Eibishter. That's very telling. Where's the whole Eibishter? The whole Eibishter in a Mishnah, Shnai, Mechz, Matalis, Meimus, Aker, Nishma, Ba'ar, Ashtikol, Gemara, or Gemara, Mishnah, Halacha, Tanya, see this Nigla, whatever you're going to learn, that's where the whole entire, to put himself, the Gemara says, no, Nafshik, everything I gave myself into Torah, the whole Gan Eden is one little dot. It's an ice, it's not even a dot of my core. It's a letter. One letter. How many letters do you speak today? Thousands of letters you pronounce as an individual. One letter in comparison to even all the letters you spoke today. One letter in comparison to all the letters you spoke in the last month. One letter in comparison to the spoken in the last year. One letter in comparison to all the letters you pronounced in your lifetime. It's so insignificant again in context. It's so minutiae. Baruch Hu, which is forever. One letter in comparison to the whole Eibishter. It's no comparison. Which that's the reason why the neshamas want to come down to this world to experience Hashem Himself, the ways for Himself by some Mawayil Lamazah, because that's where the Eibishter gave His Torah. That's where the Eibishter gave His mitzvahs. The mitzvahs we cannot perform. You cannot put on a mezuzah on your door, or put on tefillin, or eat matzah, or shake lulav and esrog in Gan Eden. It's a mitzvah in this world. That's where it's performed. That's where that's where the Eibishter gave Himself over. And of course the Torah, and Dafka the Torah, the way it came down to this world. And therefore, here, Torah, which is the Ein Sof, the level of Seviv Kalam, for that matter, even deeper than Seviv, we're not going to go into now, but that's where the Eibishter is, the whole Eibishter, the whole Mediterranean, not the Gan Eden, the highest levels of Gan Eden, it's still that little us. So of course all the neshamas are coming down, but why this world? Do we have the revelation of the Ein Sof, the infinity, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the unadulterated purity of the Ein Sof, Dafka in this world? Answer, because that's where Torah Mitzvahs was given. And Seifon, no, it's Tchilos and Seifon. The beginning is etched in the end, and the Seif Maisa, the Machshavat Tchilos, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in mind. Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisluloyis Baruch Hu B'Tachtein. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted his core, his Anechi should be B'Tachtein in this world. Therefore, the Torah was given down here, in this world. In Malachim, it's Tanoit Chal HaShamayim. No, you got it wrong. This is where I had my nisava. Nisava means like my type, my inner desire was to have a dira b'tachteinim, to have the lois, but the neichi Hashem alikecha through Torah, which Hashem nosan lonos teirase. Anon nafshik sovis Yehavis, the Yehavis, the Gemara says, mentioned before, the acronym of Anoichi Hashem alikecha. This is where I put myself into. My whole self is in Torah, in mitzvahs, and therefore this is where it'll all be manifest, because that's where the performance of Torah mitzvahs was and is and will be. And therefore, as the end is edged in the beginning, meaning to say that's where the Hashem, the most deepest parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in mind, Dafka B'Tachtenim, and therefore this revelation of Itrei Sehem, the Seviv Kalalmin, will be manifest, and therefore the neshamas come down in this world. However, El Terebe says, you can't reach this level. Achi, but Gan Eden is very telling over here that a person has to be in Gan Eden at first. To kind of tap the waters of Chachmilah. Kol Chada for the supreme Chachma, which is the beginning of Seder Shtalshalis, the order of evolution, as we mentioned many times, Seviv Kalamin, and then there's the Seder Shtalshalis, which begins from Chachma. There's the first, the supreme Chachma is usually called Chachma Datzilis, but this is the way Chachma Datzilis is through Bina, Mekanina, Korsayo, Nes is Lashon and Zair in Elam Abina, which that's where the Gan Eden Alien is. So the Neshama taps into the knowledge and enemy Ziv Ashchina, drives benefit from the Ziv Ashchina, and others has a perception of the deepest levels of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Gan Eden. So there has to be that entry point to eventually appreciate the level of Seva Kolam. Gifum Shuri Delay, each one according to his commensurate to how much they learned Torah, or their Avodas Hashem was, or how much they could comprehend and appreciate and derive pleasure of this Chachmilah, of this godly revelation. And the dew of Torah brings them life. And which again, this leads to Vakitseisa, as the Gemara says in Seita, which is the level of Tchisa Mesim, but it has to go through Gan Eden. And what does that all mean? In the end of the day, that every person has to pass on in order to have the Tchias HaMesim. So, of course, in order to have the Tchias HaMesim, you have to resurrect. The person has to pass on. But the message, the deeper message, apparently, it's even deeper than that. It's not only telling that those who passed on will be resurrected and come back to this world for the reasons, because after this world there will be the revelation of Sefer Kalam. But that says that everybody has to pass on, because you cannot reach this level to have a taste of this Chachmilah in order to, right? You can't get to the top rung of the ladder if you don't go through the bottom rung of the ladder, rungs of the ladder. And in this case, the Alter Rebbe kind of says the same message. So that means that categorically every year has to pass on in order to receive and appreciate this level of Sefer Kalam, which would come through Tchias HaMesim. So we're not talking about Tchias HaMesim. Of course, you have to categorically, a person passes on, that person is resurrected after he passed on, but does it mean by definition that everybody has to get that area in order to have the chizum? What if people are alive by the time in Tchias HaMeisim, in which there will be again millions and millions and millions of Yidden Kain Yirbu will be at the point when Tchias HaMeisim doesn't mean that they will have to pass on. So apparently, yes. And it says, Medrashim, that people will pass on for a moment. And that moment, here it's a moment, but they enter into that experience of Gan Eden, at least enough for them to be resurrected in order for them to have the experience of Seva Kol. But that's, in a sense, if you think about it, in a simple, this is very telling over here, that there's a moment that everybody will pass, every particularly Yid, will pass on in order to be Zeichet Tchias HaMeisim, and it does say that people will. In order to have that taste, even for a moment in Gan Eden, in order to kind of a step stool to the higher level of Seva Kol, which is of course Be'ein Areich, there's no comparison, but this is something which introduces the Yid to that higher appreciation or deep appreciation of the depth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to reach a Seva Kol. And it does say that, but it's hard to appreciate. So what if it's hard to appreciate? If it says, that's the way it is. I think we mentioned over here, someone asked like a letter of the Rebbe. Of course, there's a famous Gemara in Sanhedrin about the Gemara tries to bring some rhyme to the whole phenomenon of Tchias HaMeisim. But we mentioned the letter somewhere to the Rebbe that he understands a lot of things with Tchias HaMeisim. It's hard for him to wrap his mind around it. So the Rebbe said, someone believes in the Ein Sof, in the infinite Keich of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem being the omnipresent, meaning to say the Keich HaBlikvul, is limitless. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what he's God. He is Ein Sof. So when you appreciate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem is Ein Sof, so not only you don't look for an answer, you have no question to begin with. But there is no question. So there's no questions, and if the Gitator says that this is the way it's going to be, so that's the way it is. And if we don't understand it, so what? But nonetheless, the Rebbe mentioned many times that it doesn't have to manifest begashmias, physically. And the Rebbe's vod was based on this, which we say repeatedly every day, 3 times a day at least. And the end of the Amidah, Benafshi ka'ofar lakiltiya, which is in the Kainitzer, or the end of the Amidah, Benafshi ka'ofar lakiltiya. And there it's in context of Torah, Psachli b'b'sir asach, a person has to have, in order to have a psichas alev, a connection to Torah, there ought to be the bittul, the nafshi ka'ofar lakiltiya, the total selflessness. As the Gemara says, also in Sanhedrin, that a person, in many other places, that a person has a shaychus to gaiva, there's no connection to Torah, put the magnet on the other side. When you have the bittul, the nafshi ka'ofar lakiltiya is like the magnet, the connecting magnet. Torah connects to you, you connect to Torah, but the other way, there's no connection. As you try to force the magnet, it will never connect. A person's a little gaiva, and something's beyond that, there's no connection to Torah. It looks like a connection to Torah. Shuckling and so on, but there's no connection to Teiras Emes because it's a prerequisite. Nafshi ka'ofar lakil, how much bittul? Like ofar, hakol doshinolo. There's no mitzias. Why should a person call gay shaita? It says, why should a person become this guy? Of course, it's a foolishness, like all the other foolishness which the Yitzhahara presents to the person. Why this and why that? And this is the idea, but because categorically, what is it? Why a human being to be mitzvah? It's a foolish thing. And even the person that did a lot of good things, and the more you're closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the more person feels much less. Famous Beis in Igeres HaKodesh is worthwhile to see. In Igeres HaKodesh, this very segment, the famous Kotainti. And when you're closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you feel so much more bittul. You're not your being yes, your expansion on the contrary. You feel more bottle because you're closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because you learn so much Torah and so on. But Akapanim, that's what it says, Kol Gei Shaita, but the whole is a prerequisite to learning Torah. V'nafshi ka'ofar lakiltiya, psachli b'b'sir asach. There's nothing in between. So the Rebbe, by extension, says that because a person passes on, akol hoya mina ofar, akil shavel ofar, he's interred, not just randomly in order to have order in Elam Hazeh, but there's something that the person goes back to the Ofar, and from the Ofar there will be the resurrection. So the Rebbe says, "V'nafshi," when Yidden will stand with that absolute bittul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a way, v'nafshi ke'ofar lakeltia, so there will be kind of a hakel shavel ofar, which is similar to the state of the sea state of the human being, in this case of the Yid. That's enough for him to be that, to have that eligibility to stand ready for the Tchias HaMesim revelation. It doesn't have to manifest b'gashmis. It's not the old Am Yisrael are going to drop at once and pass on at once, because there will be the Benafshi Kafel Akiltia, which will allow us to enter immediately without any lashon v'revel hefsik bin time, without any interruption, into the great revelation of the Tchias HaMesim experience. And I would even add, to add what the Rebbe says, but I'm just saying, the more a person learns Chassidus Chabad, you can appreciate the true nothingness, the godless habeira be'emes, and the shiflus ha'odom, and beyond that be'emes. So that's the real v'nafshi ka'ofer l'keltia, which is again over here. It wasn't, as we just explained, that the person has to pass on technically in order to be tchias hamesim. In order to be resurrected, the person has to pass on. But what does he say over here? In order to have that the revelation of Seva Kalamin through Tchias HaMesim. So this is what Chassidus is all about. So yeah, it all comes together, the connection to the deep depth of the Chochmah B'Kodesh Baruch Hu. Chassidus Chabad, Chochmah Bina Das. And that itself causes more and more an inner V'nafshi Kafel HaKilti, not a false V'nafshi Kafel HaKilti, not even to take airtime on this. A false V'nafshi Kafel HaKilti, oxymoronic, of course. It emissary, true nafshi ka'afar lakilti, comes through Chassidus Chabad. So it's the Chochmei law which causes that bittul and that connection, kol chad lefum shi'uri delay, that the person is ready for that revelation, would be Tchias HaMesim, which is the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the level of Seva Kalam. V'dal v'day l'mevin. Enough for the understander. Again, this is Alter Rebbe saying. The Alter Rebbe continues, this is why David HaMelech says not mitzvah secha, which would be plural, which refer to all the mitzvahs, but mitzvah secha, he was referring to the mitzvah tzedakah. That's where the real rachwas becomes a keli to save kolam, to the expansion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, limitless, not memale kolam, but the save kolam. Hashem is for himself by himself. Is that tzedakah is the rechava, which is brings that mi'aid of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, that this level of seva kolam. Tach mitzvah tzedakah, which is a cliche, precisely tzedakah, which is a keli container, and a terrain, if you will, a shetach, rochav, a broad terrain, ma'oid, very much. We mentioned also the lashon ma'oid a few times. Lehislabish b'ha'oris ein sof baruch hu, that the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to invest in, to connect to, it's precisely tzedakah, and Alter Rebbe adds in brackets, levusha, you know what Hashem's garment is tzedakah. You know, a person has a jacket, it's fitting to him. A person has a garment, a vestment, it's fitting to him. A coat, it's fitting to the person. Him, her, it's something which belongs to them. It's their levush. So they go into it, and this becomes theirs. They fit into that garment. It's their garment. That's my coat, not yours, because this is what is mine. This is my size. This is mine. What is the levush of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu enters. What is tzedakah, says the pasuk. Levusha tzedakah. So tzedakah is where the Hashem, the Ein Sof, the way, again, the Seva Kalam, the transcendent dimension, where Hashem is for himself by himself, that's where his garment is tzedakah. And that's what David HaMelech says, and that will be manifest, that it will be in the future, shine without any limit, without any border, with gratis kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it's not even commensurate to how much a person could do. But nonetheless, the tzedakah brings about this level, but nonetheless it's still chesed chinam, because we are human beings. Whatever we do apparently should only reach and connect to and arouse. And that area should be the energy of reciprocation, which would be more mamalik kalamim. So therefore, on one hand, when we do tzedakah, we bring about this rechava mitzvos chamaid. In other words, the rechava mitzvos chamaid brings about the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, but it's still chesed chinam. It's still chinam. It's still a present. It's still a gift. Gratis gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in the end of the day, this is what the tzedakah arouses, this level of sevukla. Misrusul l'sat, with arousal below. Zu, which is tzedakah, nikra derech Hashem, which is called the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like we learned before. V'zeu, the way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is Hashem's lavush. This is Hashem's way. This is Hashem, the way He forms himself by Himself, not the way He contains. He contracts Himself and contains Himself, or connects to Olam is known memale kolalmi. Condenses Himself and invests into the specifics of Olam. But no, the Eibush to the way his derech. It's His mitzvah. It's His lavush. The lavush for Him, the derech for Him, the way Hashem is the transcendent dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's also Lashon Ma'od, Rechav Mitzvos Chamaid, we mentioned it very briefly before. Ma'od, this is the belief V'Tachlis, as we mentioned many times. It says Tatum Ma'od, it says twice Ma'od. Again, we mentioned this quite a few times. The Ma'od means V'Havtas Hashem L'kecha B'chol Vavcha B'chol Nafscha V'in Avedis Hashem, with all your heart, with all your soul, B'chol Ma'odcha, all your might. All your soul, the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, a person expires for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You think you have anything greater than that? Yeah, there's something greater than that. So the simple meaning is, a person's money, sometimes a person he's ready to give up a lot of things, but not ready to give up his money. But again, it's all really connected, because that's where you see the real devotion of a Yid, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even in the context of, a person can be very much Mahadir Mitzvah, but writing a check is a different experience. That's where you really see the person's devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it all ties in. Ma'odcha is also ma'meincha, your money. But especially, particularly, Chassidus explains the edge of over Ma'odcha, over v'chol avavcha, over v'chol nafshecha. If you're neitless nafshecha, the person's ready to have meiser nefesh to completely expire for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What could be greater than that? Yeah, there's something greater than that. That's the ma'od. The true bleak vul v'tachlis is usually in expressed through that ma'od, and this is so fitting over here, because this is the bleak vul v'tachlis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which comes through mitzvahs cha, the mitzvah tzedakah per se, because levush of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's core is tzedakah. However, without a bit. Speaks about again that pasuk before in the same capital. The Gan Eden, there's an end one way or another. It's not the bleak vul of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The experience of the neshama in Gan Eden, which has this outpour or this consumption in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the experience of the neshama in Gan Eden. That there's a kates, that there's a tachlis and tzimtzum. This is because the whole establishment, we explained it the other day, the whole establishment, and in length in this very chapter, click away in the previous classes, the whole establishment of Gan Eden is a nekuda ktana, is one us. It's all based on the tzimtzum of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the condensement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ein Sof, which allows the whole establishment of Gan Eden, Hatachten, Gan Eden, Ha'elin, the whole Elam about to come into place, like somebody who is his inner kechas, his inner faculties, his soul faculties. In other words, this was choosing closer to the soul, and he or she has to express himself in one word. This is an enormous contraction of their whole self in order to come down into the expression of an eis. And again, we have this, you can see it in Lukuti Amorim, Perik Yutes, Chof, namely Chof and Chof Aleph. We have this also in the end of Hey in Igeres HaKodesh. This is the fourth segment, also click away. Dr. Rebbe's Lashon is that you see a great masculine thinking. He has to condense his thoughts and his profound intellect in a word. It's a whole tzimtzum, it's a process, and this is the whole Gan Eden is all based, the whole establishment of Gan Eden is based on tzimtzum, the contraction of Hashem's Habli Gvul, which allow that us, that letter, which is the yud, which is the energy or the makeup of the entire Gan Eden, the entire Lamabog, Gan Eden, so it's all about tzimtzum. It's still part of the Memalakal phenomenon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore there's kates, there's tachlis, there's end, there's border, there is limit, there's it's a product of the tzimtzum of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's kates. But where's the Rechava, the real Rachvos, the manifestation of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu? And that'll be B'tchis HaMesim. And the levush to that, and the ability to get there is through tzedakah, giving a lot of tzedakah, because Hashem's levush of the Ein Sof is tzedakah, and then there's no end. It's rachvos, it's ma'od, but l'chol tichla, that experience of the neshama and Gan Eden, Kleis HaNefesh, as the Kleis HaNefesh Gan Eden is reisi case with tachas and tzimtzum. So Rebbe concludes, what's l'chol tichla? Apparently it's tichla, all the neshamas, there's a certain Kleis HaNefesh, which is again generic for all the neshamas. No, l'chol. L'chol means, because we know, in Gan Eden, there's different levels of Gan Eden. One higher than the other. And we spoke about this as well so many times. The the highest of heights, like it says in Kuti Hashas of the Arizal, the Kuti Hashas from the Arizal, the Pirish Maimin Azal, as the Arizal explained that Chazal tell us. The Talmidei Chachamim, and again brought a few times in Shas, Talmidei, particularly the end of different tractates, Talmidei Chachamim ein lem menucha. They don't have any rest. Even the individual Talmud Chacham doesn't have any rest. Yesterday's level is, or today's level is greater than yesterday, especially when there's certain important parts, important junctures, person's birthday, a yard site, the person goes to a higher level in Gan Eden. So besides the different levels of Gan Eden, for the different levels of tzaddikim, commensurate how much Torah they learned, and how much devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again, that itself is a broad bracket. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which knows, Beichim Klois Valev, he examines the heart and the inside of a true Eved Hashem, and a true Leimetera throughout history. Of course, every tzaddik is different and distinct in his fellow other tzaddik in his generation or in other generations. So there's all, of course, different levels. Thus the lechol, many different levels. But even the Yid himself climbs from level to level in his Gan Eden and Elam Haba experience, much more so the great tzaddikim. So Talmidei Chacham ein lem menucha, because Elim Tovim Adarigale, they themselves go from one level to the other. Ba'asagas HaTorah, the perception of Torah she'ein lo sof, Torah has no end. To when does they go? Does Moshe Rabbeinu ever came to the end? Or anyone who learned Torah, there's no end, because even a manifestation of HaKadosh, even a expression of HaKadosh, even the os of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Alter Rebbe has it in beautiful expression in a number of places in Shaykh B'Emunah, and he has it in Peleg Zayin in Shaykh B'Emunah, at the end of the 7th. He says, even a us, because ultimately it's the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a letter of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's a letter of the infinite God. So there is a certain infinity, even in any expression, despite that expression is, of course, associated with the Memala Kol Almin, the secondary, the inferior, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu connects to Eilam. And there's no comparison to the Save of Kol Almin. But nonetheless, is it an us, a letter expressed by the infinite God? Yes, so it has some level of infinity, and therefore, the Talmidei Chacham, which from Eilam, madreg from one level to the other. In Gan Eden, also, there's no stop. Okay, that's it. You reach the end. There's no end. Everything is Ein Sof. But that's only in Gan Eden. When it comes to Tchis HaMesim, Adachat Tchis Shel Menucha. Now there's no menucha, because now you're talking about different levels. Levels is a phenomenon associated with mimalik kol almin, a higher level, a lower level, atzilus, bri, yitzir, asiyah. And in Gan Eden, there's no Ein Sof, there's different amount of levels in Gan Eden. Hatachtin in Gan Eden, ha'elyin, yelchum, chayil, chol, Ein Sof. But nonetheless, there's no menucha, because you're dealing with mimalik kol almin phenomena where there's so many different levels. So there's no rest. After Tchis HaMesim, it's about the manifestation of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Ein Sof, there's no levels in Ein Sof, categorically. And therefore, Shi'el HaMenucha, everything will be the Menucha. There won't be Ein Lahem, there will be the Menucha. But a Menucha not because, okay, we're done climbing. No, you have the entire, every Neshama, every Yid will connect with the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which Hashem is beyond being the Memale Kol Almin, thus the different levels. It'll be the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Triseyim Bereishayim, no divisions, no levels. So of course, no divisions, no levels, so they're not climbing. It's just a unity with the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's Menucha, but Menucha not less as such of a connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To the contrary, it'll be that ultimate oneness, as Lashon Yisrael, Umalkal Bil Chaydai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with that intimate oneness with every single Yid. Not climbing a level. You enter into an area which is beyond the level. There are no levels. This is the Ein Sof, the Hashem, the ways for himself, by himself, and that would be the state of every single Yid. Thus, there will be Menucha. And this is the end of the chapter. Have a wonderful night. End of the epistle, that is. Have a wonderful evening.